a lot of people just agree, where everyone's kind of in consensus with how this season turned out. I haven't really heard anyone being like super, super positive about it, to be honest. Like, obviously it's been entertaining, but I don't think the fans are very much in disagreement on this as they usually are. I think everyone's kind of on the same page with like, oh, hey, like, this was a little weird. Like, every episode individually was entertaining, but like I'm a little confused as to the point of the whole season.
I mean, what was happening? I mean, in genuine sincerity, what was happening with this season? Because every episode, I guess you could argue, could stand alone on its own.
Yeah.
But I feel like by the time we got to the end and they did that Looney Tunes exit focus on Grogu, which we can get into that because that was bizarre. Everybody was kind of at a point like, what? That was it? That's how we closed it out? Like, I don't know. It was just bizarre. I couldn't even word my thoughts. I don't know if you watched my reaction video, but dude, like, I was like, I don't even know what to say.
Yeah, I didn't really know what to say either. It was just kind of an awkward, predictable ending, by the way. Like,
kind of final.
It seemed very final. True. I mean, I don't think it is. I know a lot of people were like, oh, that's a series finale. It was certainly kind of presented that way. But it was just like, there was nothing like that after the episode that left me thinking or really wanting more. And like, that's not a good sign. Like, it just felt like, oh, they did everything that I thought they were going to do. Moff Gideon has clones, predictable. The Mandalorians win, predictable.
It was kind of an
Grogu,
easy defeat, if you think about it.
Yeah, predictable. And by the way, it happened so quickly. There was not a lot of build up to it. Predictable. And then everyone's like, oh, hey, we're happy at the end. And you're like, oh, they're just doing exactly what I expected them to do. And then I think about the whole season, and there's so many plot holes within, which we can get into as we do an episode by episode breakdown. But they didn't tie it up nicely. It just felt like they had a 40-minute episode and crammed as much as they could in just to meet that 40-minute time constraint. You know what I mean? Like, it felt like they were cramming stuff in because, like, we have to make it under 40 minutes when you don't. Like, and also, why is the finale 40 minutes? This is one of Star Wars' biggest mistakes with the franchise right now, is they're making their shows that they should be long, they're making them super short. And they're not fleshing them out or letting you sit in these moments enough. They're just going, this is happening. Okay, now this is happening. Okay, now this is happening. Okay, now this is happening. And you're like, okay, wait, Jesus. Slow down.
Yeah. It's very disjointed, very much a mess. I mean, the whole season kind of feels like a fever dream. It feels like a blur. You know, I watched the finale twice. I watched it, waited an hour, and then I watched it again. And then, like, by the time the next day rolled around, I'd kind of forgotten about it. If I'm being perfectly honest. Like, I don't feel like I took anything with me. You know, at least for a month after the season 2 finale finished, people were buzzing about that for a very long time.
Yeah.
And even leading into this finale, like, the fans curated more interesting thoughts and theories of what could happen in the finale versus what actually happened in the finale. Like, for example, apparently there was no spy.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess Elia Kane, whatever her name was, I guess she was.
Right, but she wasn't even in, like, the episode, but the episode was called The Spies. So does that refer to Moff Gideon and Citizen Kane spying on the Mandalorians? Like, that wasn't even really clear. Everybody came up with these incredible theories of how the finale was going to go down. You know, was the armorer a character called Rook Cast from the comics? They came up with all these great theories about, like, Mandalorians maybe being involved. And then by the time you get to the actual thing, you're like, oh. I guess none of that came to
There wasn't
fruition.
very much thought put behind this. It's just a very generic story. Yeah, I know. I agree with you. It was just like, okay. It was very lackluster, I think is the best way to put it. And I mean, if you look at the whole season now too, and the whole spies thing, like people are making theories like, well, I heard this thing about Moses in the desert and the spies and calling him Hebrew. I'm like, all right, they're not thinking that deep, guys. That's not what this is. They just, I don't know. I think the spies was kind of to throw you off, but also it was referring to the Kane chick who is the spying on the New Republic, because she's somehow still loyal to Moff Gideon for some reason, which they don't explain at all. They're just like, oh, she used to work for him, so she loves him. You're like, okay, why? I don't. If I was arrested and I'm like, they're forcing me to like, be whatever they're called, retrained or whatever, the whatever camp, I forget what it's called.
The program that they're part of, the rehabilitation program or something.
Then I don't think, like, what motivation does she have to love Gideon and then torture Pershing, get some information out of him? I guess that was to give it to Gideon, I suppose.
Which, by the way, now that episode looks really pointless.
Oh my God, that episode looks so bad. It looks so bad.
Really bad in comparison to the season as a whole now. Now it's like, what was the point of that? Like, you could have just not even done that episode and then have Moff Gideon explain what he explained in the finale. And that would have been fine. You just wasted an entire 50 minutes, which, by the way, I'm pretty sure that that episode is the longest of the entire season. They spent 50 minutes, of nothing.
Yeah, and then we have, I have such a problem with that. I'll go on a tangent on that later. But
good.
With the Moff Gideon thing, too, it's like, I'm so tired of these evil guys monologuing why they're doing something.
Yes!
It's so bad. It's such bad writing. It's so lazy. You're just going,
it's Saturday morning cartoon.
I did this because the whole time I've had clones and I was going to be a Force user. And I don't know why I'm telling you this other than to make myself feel better. And you're like,
you know what it reminds me of?
It's the same trope.
You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of that scene in The Incredibles where Frozone and Mr. Incredible are sitting in the car.
Yes, I think about the same thing.
When I was a kid, I had no idea what they were talking about, right? Like, you're a young kid, like, you're not really paying attention to that dialogue. But as an adult, you watch that and you're like, oh my God, they're mocking the bad guys that they fight on, like, a weekly basis. And they're like, he starts monologuing about how inevitable the fate of the world is.
How the world truly is, yeah.
Yeah, and they're joking about it. And that is literally what Moff Gideon was doing. The entire episode was monologuing, and I even said this in my reaction video. I'm like, is he just, like, all cards on the table? Like, I'm a burger. I'm the evil villain. I'm the Saturday morning cartoon. It felt like I was watching, like, I don't know, Superman, the animated series on Saturday mornings.
Yeah. I mean, it's fine to do that every now and again. It just feels like this is a very... It's
vanilla writing.
Common. It's very vanilla. Like, dude, you can do this in interesting ways, and this is what we've been begging for the whole season, is to take these points and weave them in. Be creative with how you weave in these points, and give us clues, and don't treat us like idiots and just spoon-feed us the information at the end to explain everything. That's not fun or interesting. And I get it, dude. It's like Disney's... They're trying, like, Star Wars is, for them, it's like, oh, it's about kids. We want to appeal to kids too. It's like, okay, but you can do both. They're not mutually exclusive. You can appeal to a lot of different people and make it interesting and creatively well put together. And also you can make it appeal to a large audience. So I was just disappointed. I was really disappointed with the overall writing of the season. Like, looking at our fears and suspicions were correct. The whole thing was just disjointed. Like, I couldn't tell you who the season was actually about. They made this last episode all about Din, kind of. But then you're like, I don't care. He hasn't had a journey at all. He's just been chilling out and then all of a sudden at the end you expect us to care. And by the way, dude, like, some of these scenes at the end of him and Grogu, like, fighting together, that's the best of the season. Those were the most I felt for anyone during the whole season, was when they're together and you have the suspense of what's going to happen to Grogu and stuff, you know? And then we only got, like, that's 2 minutes throughout the whole season of these two characters. And this is, I don't know. Like, I don't know. And then, like, with the armorer, she had such a big part, which is a big nothing burger for the whole season. Axe Woves is all of a sudden so loyal to Bo-Katan for another random reason that they don't show you. And I get people are going to get in the comments here and be like, well, actually, technically, it's because she was the leader and she had the Darksaber, so of course he's going, like, dude, I'm sorry.
Oh, the Darksaber doesn't exist anymore.
Darksaber doesn't exist. They just got rid of that. And yeah, I don't know. I was not impressed with this season overall. We can complain about it all we want, but I don't want this to be like a super complainy episode, because I did like a lot with this episode, like, individually. I think it was one of the strongest episodes of the season. I think the pacing was off. And I think the writing was just rushed and not super well rounded, but it was really entertaining. Like, and so let's get into the scene by scene, and we can kind of go through what we liked and didn't like. But I don't want this to just be like a venting session about like all of our frustrations, because there was a lot of good stuff with this season. It's just, and individually with each episode, it's just overall, I mean, we're comparing it to last season, which is some of the best Star Wars content we've gotten, and this was just what a lackluster follow-up, I suppose.
I feel like it falls into the same categories as Kenobi in the Book of Boba Fett, which is, wow, what a missed opportunity. Yep. You know, I feel like there's a theme happening right now with Star Wars, and it should be called the theme of missed opportunity, because the same thing happened in Kenobi, the same thing happened in Book of Boba Fett, the same thing happened in Mandalorian. It's like where fans can see the opportunity in these story threads, and then the writers just don't do them. And it seems like the most obvious route. And instead we get these incredibly lacking stories with no depth of character, no stakes. That's the other thing with the finale that I just struggled with, is like, where are the stakes? Like I didn't feel anything, you know, and like the season 2 finale, you really feel like that there's something to fight for there. Like Moff Gideon wants to take the child. He has a duel with Din Djarin. And at the end, they're threatened by all these, what are they called? Dark Troopers? Yeah, the Dark Troopers. And then Luke Skywalker comes in and saves the day in this dramatic fashion. It feels like there are real stakes there. Whereas at the end, I was like, I don't really feel like there's a threat of loss of life or a threat that really needs to be fought for. Or like, are we going to lose Mandalorian culture? It just felt very like Saturday morning cartoon. Also, hi guys, welcome to the podcast. We've been talking for 11 minutes and 40 seconds about our overall thoughts on the season finale, which we're going to get into, and do our scene by scene breakdown, which is super exciting. Before we do that, you guys know the drill. Like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you haven't already, click that notification bell. We got content coming out here soon. We have Star Wars Rebels. We're going to be watching that in preparation for Ahsoka. Matt and I are hoping to watch the original trilogy and get something posted for that for May the 4th. We got a lot of content coming out. So if you're coming back weekly, you need to click that notification bell and you need to subscribe. Because if you like Star Wars content, you should hang out with us, because we also like Star Wars content. And that's my spiel.
That's a good spiel.
Thank you very much.
Spiel to have.
I've been working on this script for weeks now. Just kidding. I'm feeling very frustrated because I think it's fair to call it out at this point. It's like we've seen the same routine over the last 8 months. 9 months,
and I
10
mean,
months.
coming off of a really strong creative season, which was Mandalorian season 2. Like, yes, he had his side adventures, but like the overarching story was so good and so creative and well done, and like they made the necessary decision to bring Luke Skywalker back, but also the relationship between Grogu and Din was so good and rich and robust, and this season was like, okay, it just leaves you going, oh, come on, guys. We had 2 years to do this. You couldn't put together a more thoughtful story arc for the whole season? Like, what is the bottom line for this season? What's the tagline for it? Bo-Katan helps retake Mandalore?
Mandalorians are stronger together?
I guess.
I guess. I don't even think that was the arc until the last 3 episodes.
Yeah.
Like, I don't
No, it
even
wasn't.
think, like, they didn't really start pushing that hardcore until like the last 3 episodes, I think, 3 or 4.
Yeah, so we have the Apostate. Okay. Decent episode. Not the best first episode back, but I thought it was okay, fine. Sets the tone. Mines of Mandalore. Really good episode. I enjoyed that one a lot. I thought that was a very fun episode. Grogu and Mando are on their little adventure, and you're like, okay, this season's headed in a good direction. And then the 3rd episode comes. And I don't even know.
And you think, uh-oh, we're in trouble.
Yeah, you think, whoops, this is the longest episode of the season. Why did we spend all this time? And then you're like, oh, don't worry, they'll come back to all this. No, they don't. they mention a couple points from
They
it briefly.
decided
Could have
it
been
was
covered in
worth
2 scenes here.
Yeah. No, they could have sprinkled it throughout the season.
Yeah.
And they didn't even do that. They decided just 1 episode to Dr. Pershing and Citizen Kane, and that's all we have to do. We're not going to tie it through the rest of the season or make it this underground espionage-esque thing with
which, by the
cloning.
way, that's way more interesting to, like, they cut back on Coruscant. Like, what are these people up to? Why do they keep peppering them in? And then they're like, oh, and then there's like a big payoff at the end where it's built up for a while. Not just, hey, here's all the information at once, and we're never going to see these characters for the rest of the season. You're like, okay. And then we have the 4th episode, Chapter 20, The Foundling, which the main draw to that is Ahmed Best is back, and we get Order 66 with really, really colorful lightsabers. And then, but it's
Which
also like
fun episode. I mean that
fun, but also they reveal the massive plot hole here, which is they run out of gas on their little jetpacks after like 2 minutes of flying. And then in this finale, we see Axe Woves fly for what, 20 minutes up into space? No problem. No big deal. It's fine.
Against a big storm.
Like, I don't know. And then we have the pirate, which is just a filler episode. Interesting, fun episode.
Which, by the way, they never clarified.
Effects.
Apparently, Moff Gideon hired them, but we still don't know what for.
Why? To attack Navarro? Why?
Why is he attacking Navarro?
And then we have Guns for Hire, which was just a Clone Wars episode thrown in here. Which, again, I think there was a lot of positive aspects of it, but Lizzo kind of ruined it.
Kind of.
Sorry. And it was also just super rushed. And then The Spies. Okay. Some creative elements there. Mad Max Mandos.
Probably the strongest episode of the season.
I think, yeah, that one or the last one. And then you have The Return, which could have just been one episode. Like, that should have been, make it a one long episode. I just don't get this. I don't get a lot of the structure with it. It's like there was so much potential here. And they just really just brought it to the finish line and said, all right, we're just not going to polish this up at all. It's just, here it is. This is the finished product. So I think enough to be said. We can do more of our final thoughts on the season as a whole at the end of the episode. But let's jump into the scene by scene for the finale, chapter 24.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
This is going to be fun. This is where the fun begins.
Cool. So this episode is called The Return. It's chapter 24. It was written by Jon Favreau and directed by Rick Famuyiwa. He seems to have had I think he was executive produced the whole season, which I like his directorial style. I would say it's a lot more cinematic and you can really tell when he's directing, and I like him at the helm. I think the direction of this was about as it was good. I just think the editing was a little weird for this episode, and a lot of his episodes too, but the cinematography and the way how cinematic it feels and how big, I think that's how the whole season should have been shot. So I enjoyed him. I think he did a really good job directing the episodes he did this season. I just think some of the editing for them could have just been drawn out a little bit more. Like if this episode would have been 50 minutes even, let some of these scenes just breathe a little bit longer. Let us sit in these moments a little bit longer. I think I would have a lot different of an opinion. But I think he's a good director. I will say confidently. Him and Bryce Dallas Howard, I think, are really good for Star Wars.
I really like him too.
Yeah,
I think some of the fight scenes I think it was probably the Spies, but I commented on these in my reaction videos where they just felt really well directed. Like the action was really readable. And I felt like it's very different from the shaky cam that you see in Kenobi. Like if you're comparing like the camera direction in The Spies to the episode of Kenobi where what was it, like Reva and the stormtroopers, they go on like that Jabeam, is it that planet where they try to escape on like the ships or something, and the camera's shaking and I'm like, I can't tell what's going on.
Yeah.
Like, in my opinion, I think that's a really cheap way of camera shooting because it's like you're not really directing. You're just shaking the camera so I can't read the moves or call out any bad editing or stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like, I just think it's a cheap way of shooting. So I do really appreciate Rick's directorial style. Like, some of the pan-outs, like zooming in on the Mandalorians, it felt like I could have seen that in a theater.
Yeah, but I will say that J.J. Abrams' long zoom in thing, you know, that they brought to Star Wars recently. I don't love that. It's like, it just reminds me of like Star Trek when they do it a bunch. Like J.J. Abrams loves doing that in his movies where it's, you know, it's like a zoomed out shot of something coming at you and then they zoom in really quick. Yeah.
They zoom in. Yeah, that's
it's becoming a little overused in Star Wars.
Yeah, okay, I will agree with you there. They did do that with the Mandalorians, and they did do that with the crashing ship that Axe Woves was on. I did notice that. Both of those. Like, when all the Mandalorians were coming down, it's like, yeah, I know what you mean. And, like, I can think of a couple shots of the Enterprise where they did that in Star Trek Into Darkness. Like, there are a few shots in that particular movie. That combined with an abusive amount of lens flare.
Oh my god, yeah. J.J. Abrams loves his lens flare, dude.
Can't stand it. He made the Enterprise in those movies looks like an Apple store.
Dude, I love the J.J. Abrams Star Trek movies. I think they're awesome. Which I think they're making another one, by the way, too.
Oh god, I thought it was still in limbo.
I think it's moving forward. I think there was some news on that recently. This isn't the Star Trek show, though. So it's the Star
No, that's
Wars
fine.
show.
Although I will bring up Star Trek later because I finished season 3 of Picard. because it just ended the other day, and I was telling you the first 2 seasons were like absolute shit. They were horrible, by the way. Like, it's some of the worst television I've ever seen in my entire life. Surprisingly, the 3rd season seemed to get a little bit back on track. I still have my fair share of issues with it, like how dark the show is shot, or some of the dialogue between the characters, but I thought they stuck the landing, which I was like, oh, was a pleasant surprise. So I might bring that up later.
you can have another Star Trek podcast. How about that?
Another Star Trek podcast. There we go. The next channel coming soon.
The official description is the Mandalorian and his allies confront their enemies. Okay. So we open up. They waste no time in starting this episode, which is again why I kind of think they should have just made it into a 2-parter season finale. We see Bo-Katan leading the Mandalorians to safety. They're still fighting. She tells Axe Woves that Moff Gideon has set up his base. I hated the dialogue here when she's on the comm link. It just felt very forced. I don't know if you felt the same way.
What did she say exactly? I don't even really remember.
She's just like, red alert, red alert. Moff Gideon is setting up. It's just like the way she delivered the lines here. Let me see if I can pull it up.
You mean just blocky in her delivery?
Yeah, and it just wasn't, I don't think the writing was very good. It just felt like they were like, hey, here's the thing you need to say. Here's what we're trying to convey. And they just wrote a first draft of what she would say. And they're like, boom, nailed it. Let's move. Next scene. And you're like,
I don't,
wait a minute. Is this how people talk? Because I don't think it is. Let me pull it up real quick.
It's like that guy in the Star Wars Holiday Special that you were mocking, that Imperial guy that was like, no ships will be permitted to land.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Have to beat them on the ground.
Yeah.
They're sending up fighters to destroy the fleet. Evacuate everyone. Use the capital ship as a decoy. We can't beat them in the air. We have to beat them on the ground.
It sounded a little bit like she was reading lines.
I just didn't. Maybe I'm making too much out of that, but it was just choppy. Sorry, I don't want to nitpick everything here.
No, it's fine.
That was one thing that stuck out to me as I was watching it. So they're evacuating everyone. They're retreating into the tunnels. They are making kind of quick work of these Mandalorian commando stormtrooper guys who kind of aren't that awesome as previously.
They fall under the same category as stormtroopers. Let's just leave it at that.
Yeah, they're terrible shots. We'll put it that way. Then in the meantime, we see, or they plant thermal charges, blow them up, whatever. They're getting out of there. Then we see Din being escorted by these guys through the corridors of the base. He just breaks free, fights them. Cool scene here. He's doing his cool little parkour moves. Really good.
He was totally doing parkour, and I said that. That was like parkour. He's doing all these little flips on the floor.
Yeah, he's doing his cool flips. I mean, it's a cool action sequence, but it's like, why didn't we get more of him being a badass throughout the rest of the season? I don't know.
Also, they only sent 2 guards with him.
They sent two guards who don't have guns. They could have just shot him, but for some reason they didn't have them. He was having a tough time finding them. They finally restrain him again with the whip like they did in the last episode. And then we see Grogu come out of nowhere, and IG-12 saves them, shoots them, and then starts spraying Din. Cute moment here, but like...
Where did he come from?
Where did he come from? And then people in the comments are like, well, he used the Force. Okay, that's such a lazy explanation. He was behind a door. They couldn't get to him before. And now all of a sudden he's just there. Like, I'm sorry. You got to show him getting
especially because he was with Bo. Yeah. That's what he could have done is he could have... It doesn't take a lot to fix this show is what I'm noticing. It's not a lot of effort to write in another scene that would make another scene make more sense. For example, all you had to do was add like a 2 to 3 minute scene of Grogu going off on his own and finding a way to get past the guards to get to Din.
Yeah.
But they just went from one scene to the next, and it makes just no sense. And they don't have to do a lot to get there, but the fact that they just skip over these things, it just really bothers me, and it tells me that not a lot of thought is going into the writing.
Right. Well, it's also like, again, to my point at the beginning, which is like they're just trying to cram it into 40 minutes. Like, why are we cramming all this in?
Time.
Why don't we show that? Even if it's a 10-second little clip of Grogu finding his way, I don't care. Show something. Like, you don't. It only hurts the show to cut something like that out. And there's not a purpose for it. We're not on television where there's commercials and all that stuff. Like, we can make these episodes as long as we want. And I don't want to hear the excuse of like, oh, we'll budget. Okay, sorry, Disney. This is a profitable show for you. Put more budget into it. Like, get more budget to do these things. And I don't even think that's probably what the issue is. I don't know what the issue is, why they're not making, these extra scenes in there. But you saw this throughout, like little things like this, and it really hurt the episode of like, you couldn't have just shown 30-second clip to bridge these scenes a little bit better, or to let us sit in this moment a little bit more. Like, this thing with Din happened so quickly. He got away from him so fast, like just immediately. Like, so if you take the last episode and splice it with this one, okay, he gets captured. 2 seconds later, he escapes. There's no gravity behind that now. It's just like, okay. All right,
yeah, there was no stakes to that.
No,
you thought like something dramatic was going to happen with him. Like, everybody was theorizing, what if this happens to Din? What if this happens to Din? We saw the Mind Flayer. Would they use the Mind Flayer? Would they Bucky Barnes him?
Yeah.
A lot of great theories going into this. But then again, it's just like, oh, solved. Yeah. Dad and son are back together doing hijinks, and Grogu was just able to find him easily. It's like, guys,
there's so many things you could have done, and then you're just like, oh, okay, all right, okay, he got away. Okay, cool. I suppose that's fine. So a lot of flamethrower in this episode. That one guy has the flamethrower on Din, which is also funny. They just spraying their fire on him. His cape somehow doesn't catch on fire, which I also thought was really weird. He must have a flame retardant cape. Meanwhile, we see Bo-Katan leading everyone through the caves again. We see the TIE interceptors deploying. Great. One of the things I love with this episode, the special effects, like the graphics here are awesome. The sound design of these TIE interceptors was so cool. How they're like dropping down. It's really loud, really cinematic, really well shot, I thought. Like, that was a huge positive. It's entertaining to watch.
There was good production quality in here.
Oh, yeah,
I will
really
say
good.
that, especially like with Axe-Woves flying into the interior of the ship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
shots like that
badass.
were really high production quality.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Especially if you're comparing it to something like Kenobi.
It
was obvious in a lot of scenes.
Yeah, you're more. It's a little bit more immersive in that way. In the command center, we see that Gideon that the TIE interceptors have been launched and that the capital ship will be destroyed. He sees that Din has escaped. Din contacts R5, telling him he needs to infiltrate the base and find Gideon, because that's the only way this is going to end things. R5 is being a nice little guy. He's been a nice little side character to have come back.
See, he's not totally useless.
He's like an R2 flying down in there. He flies on into the base and starts doing some classic Star Wars hijinks with his little thingy.
It's the interlude between video game missions. Solve this code before you go back to the main character player. You're playing as Cal, and then you come upon this thing that needs a code, and then you have to unlock the code, and then you can go back to playing as Cal.
Yeah.
That's what this was.
Yeah, totally. So then Wolves gets up to the Mandalorian capital ship. This was a cool scene, how he flies in and like just lands and keeps sprinting. I thought that was cool. That was like a really
production
cool,
quality, yeah.
Really cool production quality. He tells everyone to get off the ship immediately to send reinforcements. He's so loyal. This was weird to me. It just didn't seem like in his character. All of a sudden he's like, Bo-Katan needs our help. We have to help her. I love her. She's the best. And you're like, did you hate her 5 seconds ago?
Again, doesn't take a lot of work, but add a tiny scene of Bo saving his life.
Yeah.
Or something. Like just give us anything.
You can get a look on his face. You can literally convey that. Get a look on the actor's face being like, oh, like, I kind of respect her now. Like, have him seeing her fighting everyone else and leading them, and then he's inspired by that kind of thing.
Yeah, or her helping, like, another injured Mandalorian or something. Just, like, something tiny. It doesn't take a lot of effort to add in those small scenes, but when you do, it just explains the character motivations a lot better, and it helps tie the thread of the story to be that much tighter. It's just weird to me. Like, a lot of characters just said or did things that, like, weren't consistent with past actions. Yeah. And, like, Axe-Woves, I think he's really cool. I really like that guy. I really like the actor in particular. I think he's super interesting, but like he's very black and white with what they've had him choose to do.
He's just a guy, essentially. Like he's very surface level.
We didn't even really get in explanation for why he was super apprehensive towards Bo. Like, oh, she doesn't have the Darksaber anymore? Like, okay.
And then she's just like, yeah, her forces melted away. That was the explanation they gave. Which, by the way, another corny line. My forces melted away. Okay. Fine. Then you don't dive into it anymore. You're right. It's like, oh, she doesn't have the Darksaber. Okay.
Yeah, they just need to add more. That's it. Like, it doesn't take a lot, guys. Just add a little bit more depth there to help us understand these motivations.
So Wolves is starting to use the laser cannons to defend the ship. The TIE interceptors and bombers come up. They start blasting it immediately. The ship doesn't have shields. Again, confusing. It's like an Imperial Star Destroyer ship, isn't it? And he's a sitting duck. He's just getting blasted to pieces.
Which, by the way, thanks for faking us out with Axe-Woves' death, but not really.
I I know. Which, by the way, that would have been so much more. That would have been so much more impactful.
Impactful. Like, what if that was his moment of, Lady Kryze, I'm sorry I didn't believe in you.
I do now, and I believe that the cause of Mandalore is more important than me.
Than my life. Go and lead our people. Something like that, and then he dies in a blaze of glory. Like, I think, good, that kind of plays off of Paz's sacrifice, you know? Which, by the way, they don't mention in this episode at all. Din doesn't know that Paz was brutally murdered. Nobody mentions this? That was like a huge sacrifice of the last episode. Paz gave his life. And Din just, no reaction. No reaction from Bo. Ragnar's an orphan. Nobody goes up to this kid and says, hey, I'm sorry your dad was killed.
You're right. And then we don't even know if he knows. Dude, you're right. I forgot about that. What a big hole. They just don't mention it. And he was like kind of a cool character here, like in
he's been there since season 1. He's been like an antagonist to Din since season 1. So I feel like
I didn't think of that.
It's worth it for Din to have a reaction to this guy's death. This guy that was so against him, and then at the last minute, like, turns around and supports Din. Din should have a reaction to that, I think.
Yeah, they all should. He was a big part of their crew.
So anyway, Paz Vizsla's dead. Nobody cares. We could have had a very impactful, sentimental, emotional moment with Axe Woves being like, Lady Kryze, lead our people, and then dies in a blaze of glory. Like, that would have been appropriate to me. But it's like, no, he fakes out and gets away too.
Yeah, he gets away too. So, by the way, then they switch, all right? So he's fighting, and then they go right back to Din. And he's telling our 5 to deactivate the shields one at a time. We're jumping around a lot, okay? So then we go to this scene. He's like deactivating it. Really cool scenes here. Great choreography. Awesome production. Again, huge strong point of this season is like the production value was really good. And these action sequences are well done. It's just the way they connect with everything else feels a little disjointed. But this was really cool, the way that Din was, you know, kind of reminiscent of episode 1 through the red laser shield things. And he's fighting them one by one with his cool, good hand-to-hand combat skills. We are reminded of how good of a warrior like he actually is. And this is the stuff this is the bread and butter of the show to me, is watching him fight. You know, that's what kind of drew
it was like
me in.
Bounty Hunter days.
Right. Like, and I love that. Like, even the first scene of Mandalorian, when he walks into that cantina thing, and you're automatically like, oh, he commands respect. He commands a room. Viewers love to see like the hero of the show just being really good at what they do. You know what I mean? Like, it's fun watching. And that was what this scene was just like, we know he's going to get through this. We know he's going to beat these guys up. He's still like fallible. He's not like perfect in every way, but it's just, it's fun to watch him do that. And this was really one of the only scenes we got like solid Din being Din, if that makes
solid
sense.
Din kicking ass. Yeah.
Yeah. So
and also kind of weird that these guys don't really put up much of a fight.
Yeah, they were just bad.
They're just kind of sucky. Like, they fall. I don't know. It's like they keep introducing these things that are supposed to be like elite. Like, sorry to keep comparing it to The Mandalorian season 2, but at the end of season 2, the Dark Troopers present a threat. Din can't beat one up. If you recall, there's a scene in a hallway where Din is fighting one of the Dark Troopers, and the Dark Trooper is like slamming its fist into Din's face, and the helmet's going back. And the only person that can cut these guys down easily is Luke Skywalker. Because he's a Jedi, he's trained, he's powerful, he can cut through these guys. It just kind of felt like child's play a lot. Like, even with the Praetorian Guards, they just seem to burn through all these antagonists, like, or these bad guys super quickly. And I was like, is there no stake here?
Also, on top of that, these Mandalorian guys, whatever we're calling them, Stormtrooper guys, they're just guys, by the way. We kind of glossed over this, but like one of them comes into the command center with Gideon. They're like, the TIE interceptors have been deployed. And
like, he says that in the most robotic way, too. I said that in my reaction video. He's like, sir, the TIE interceptors have been deployed. I'm like, are you a robot? Like, what is
but
happening
also, dude,
here?
like, you'd think these guys would be like elite soldiers or something, right? Which brings up another question. Who are these guys? Did Moff Gideon pay them? The Empire doesn't exist anymore, so it's not like they're being like recruited, really, are they? I don't know. I thought maybe they would have been clones of someone else or something.
I thought they were clones of Moff Gideon at first.
Yeah, or Din, because of the little bug man taking his blood. I'm like, maybe that had something to do with it. Since Din got his blood sucked out at the beginning, they made a point to showing that at the beginning of the season. And then obviously the base ended up being on Mandalore the whole time. So maybe Moff Gideon got that blood and then turned a bunch of Din clones evil or something.
Ooh, see, you're putting more thought into that than they did.
Yeah. Yeah. And so when it was just like, sir, they've done this. I'm like, wait, who are you? You're just a guy. And how do they have so many of them? They recruited like hundreds of these guys, it looks like. Who are they? I'm genuinely confused as to who these guys are. Like, what's their motivation for fighting for Moff Gideon? Like, these are the little things that it's like, I guess you don't have to explain it, but that's what makes the show, that's what makes shows better, is you don't leave any gaps to be, and this is a huge gap. Where did these guys come from? You don't just have guys that are willing to sacrifice their lives and fight for you for no reason.
I thought it was part of the intrigue, too, of the spies. Because they made out these guys to be, like, super mysterious.
Yeah,
like,
I thought
maybe
they'd be some kind of
Mandalorians?
super trooper. Yeah, maybe there's some kind of like, because then he talks about like, oh, I'm combining, the stuff of the Kaminoans and the Jedi and the Mandalorians.
Like, I'm taking all the best qualities of all these three things. I'm like, so are these guys Mandalorians who can use the Force?
I guess.
Which apparently not. We still don't know anything about these guys, even though the intrigue was set up in episode 7. So,
yeah, I thought there was going to be a moment where
thread.
Din was fighting him, and then one of their helmets comes off, and he sees it's like him.
A Mandalorian or him.
Like, wouldn't that be crazy if it was like him, and he's like, what the hell,
Yeah.
I thought that was weird. I don't, and like, I'm Mr. Nitpick, like, but these are the details that I look for in shows. It's like, you shouldn't necessarily even have to be asking these questions. It should have been explained in just one line of dialogue or something where it's like, these are like super troopers that are really loyal to the Emperor, or that were really loyal to the Emperor, but they're just guys. Okay.
Yeah, they're just generic. They're just as generic as stormtroopers, is what they've essentially told us.
Yeah, with jetpacks. They fly now. They fly now.
They fly now. Oh my god. We really need to watch the sequel trilogy together just to make fun of it.
I don't know if I can stomach it, but that's not a bad idea.
It'd be really funny to just get like a couple like beers. Like, I get a glass of wine, you get a beer, and we just watch the sequel trilogy.
Sure. I'm down for that. It'd be fun. So he defeats them. He steals their weapons. He's a badass here. It's a good scene. Like, very entertaining scene to watch. Then we see the mouse droids coming up. They discover R5. And then R5 just flies away, gets away from him immediately.
They bully him to death.
They just start bonking into him. And then we see Din go into the Gideon's laboratory, which is full of tanks containing the clones of Moff Gideon. So interesting scene here is we see them all. We see what Gideon's plan was the whole time, which is just to make a bunch of clones of himself. Not that surprising, kind of predictable. You're like, oh, okay, because they kind of foreshadowed this in the last episode. He's just making a bunch of himself, and then Din just kills them all immediately. Okay, so you had this kind of interesting storyline, and then all of a sudden Din just kills them all. All right.
And it's easy. Like, Moff Gideon didn't put like some kind of code together where only he would know the code to like unlock the like all the little cubicles and have them like blow up. Like, it was weird to me that Din was able to destroy it as well as he could, and not only that. Right after they're done, the doors open, they go to the other side, and Moff Gideon's just waiting there for them. Like he expected this to happen?
Yeah.
And he's like, you destroyed all my clones, boo-hoo! And I'm like, you were just standing there, dude. And were you watching him on your security camera? How do you know?
Yeah, and then he's like, we can get to this in a sec, but he talks about how they were like Force users. We didn't even see that. It's like, how do we even know that worked? And then there's a whole nother thing that I want to get into, but I'll wait till we get to that scene. So at this time, we see the survivor captain, Skinny Pete, I think is who that is.
Skinny Pete from Breaking Bad.
From Breaking Bad. Leads Bo-Katan to the surface of the cave with like the plants in it and stuff, which again, we're jumping around so much. They hang out there for like 5 seconds. And you know what it kind of reminded me of on the topic of Star Trek is the Wrath of Khan. Right, when they go down to that, like...
Yes, Genesis.
Yeah.
It's Genesis for sure.
Yeah, and then Khan strands him down there.
Do I know how to cook, or do I know... Or what did she say? I can't remember the exact line, but then they talk about the Kobayashi Maru.
Yeah.
I don't like to lose. I don't believe in the no-win scenario.
I don't believe in the no-win scenario.
I could probably quote. That's another movie I could probably quote like all the way.
I don't think this one's from Wrath of Khan. It's from the what's the other one with the whale?
The Voyage Home?
Voyage Home.
No.
With
weren't you talking
with
about
Scotty when he's on the computer, he's like, a keyboard. How quaint.
How quaint.
And then the chick walks in and he's like, not now, Madeline. And she's like,
no, Madeline. That's like the best. Those two movies are like the two
anytime
best
anytime I'm
movies.
near a keyboard now, like an actual keyboard that's not on my laptop, I'm always like, a keyboard. How quaint. And then,
I love the hello computer.
Computer. Hello computer.
They'd fix up the mouse.
Yeah.
Hello computer. That movie has no right being as good as it is.
That's hilarious. Okay.
But
so,
yeah, it essentially is Genesis. That's exactly what it looked like. In fact, I watched that with Dad, and Dad was like, "Is this Star Trek?" Like,
yeah. Yeah, and they're like talking about how they survived with the hideouts and food caches scattered throughout Mandalore, the underground gardens. They didn't know stuff could grow there. Blah blah blah. Just a bunch of dialogue that was like kind of interesting, but not really. And then the armorer is like, "Hey, the reinforcements have arrived." So they're there for 2 seconds, and then they just leave. Okay, was that scene really necessary? I don't know. But anyways, they start heading back. So they start flying above the big chasm thing down to where the base is or whatever. And we have a really corny part here, which I just cringed at, which is when they're flying and then as they're flying down, they did the J.J. Abrams like zoom in thing. And then you see Bo-Katan take out her sword and go, and she's like flying like Superman, like towards the enemy. It's like,
it was a little tongue in cheek. It was cheeky. It was ooh.
And then they just start flying, and then all these guys start coming out. Just the random guys who have the stormtrooper jetpack guys, which there's like 100 of them. I still don't know where they came from. And then they start flying in combat, and we start fighting. Some cool shots here, I thought. Like, interesting. Like, I bet the storyboarding for this was cool when they're like, oh, we have the Mandalorians fight the evil Mandalorians. Like, that's kind of a cool idea. I just don't think the execution was quite there. But, like, it was an entertaining, like, scene of them starting to fight. It's just, again,
and then
it felt like just everything was happening so fast. They went to this little garden thing, and then they're like, okay, we got to turn around and go back. Then they're flying back, and they're fighting within the span of like 2 minutes.
It felt like a checklist a little bit.
Yeah, totally.
It felt like they made a list of things that like, oh, we need to see this and this and this and this and this. And then that's kind of how the execution felt.
Yeah, I would agree. It's just, again, beat. Hit every
it didn't feel like
beat.
A story. It just didn't feel like a story so much as, like you said, this happened, then this happened, then this happened, and then this happened.
Mm-hmm. So then we see Grogu and Din entering Gideon's command room, and he enters and is very angry that Din killed his little Force-sensitive children before they could draw their first breath, he says. Jaren charges at Gideon. They start fighting, hand-to-hand combat. Again, cool scene here as they're fighting. I guess Gideon has some kind of like, it's like a, I don't know, it's like a bodysuit that like is also makes him stronger and stuff.
It's an Iron Man suit.
Yeah, kind of, essentially. And then the Praetorian Guards come in and start attacking Din. And I thought this was well done. I mean, those guys are obviously badass. I don't know where these guys come from. I would like to have some more information on Praetorian Guards and how they're still like a thing after the Empire kind of folded. And why are they part of the Empire? I don't know.
I don't know. I was like, are they skilled warriors that were trained by, I don't know, Vader?
Yeah, I mean, we know what the Inquisitors are. The Praetorian Guards are just kind of mysterious, and I'm sure someone's going to comment on this and be like, "Well, actually, the Praetorian Guards, and we have to in this comic book." And I'm like, "Okay, but I haven't read that. I don't know." So, like, if to a regular viewer,
they shouldn't assume. A good story should never assume.
Right,
that
that's
the
what I mean.
audience
Yeah,
knows
you got
everything.
Yeah, I mean, and you don't need to. Again, don't spoon feed it to us. Just give us slight little hints here and there, like let us sit in one scene and have some more dialogue heavy moments to explain some of this stuff.
I'd still find it really weird that Gideon was just waiting on the other side of that door instead of defending the clones that took so long to make of himself.
Yeah, because it was just an easy story point to hit, because that's what every bad guy does, is they sit there and then they monologue about what they did. And then he's like, I could have stopped you, but I wanted to have this big moment with you.
But here's the thing. If these guys, so then the question has to be asked, was that the plan? Was that Moff Gideon's plan to let Din destroy all those guys? Or was he just that idiotic and stood on the other side of the door and just waited as this was going on? Because he had to assume that somebody was going to get to all these clones.
Yeah.
And then the third option is the writers just didn't think to do that.
Yeah, I think they were just like, yeah, we got to have them fight. And that's too much work to explain all this other stuff. Just have them fight. So at this point, they're beating the shit out of Din, the Praetorian guards, and then we see Grogu come and starts distracting them in his IG-12 unit. This is a tense moment. I thought this was, again, cool. Like, this was a strong suit of the episode. I thought was like, this was a cool scene. Like, it just on its own, cool watching it, but it didn't connect with everything else well enough. And you feel a lot of tension here as Gideon like uses his little cord thingy to drag Din back as they as he's trying
Close
to go
in on Grogu. Yeah,
exactly. And then we see the Praetorian guards like start closing in on Grogu. They cut off the arms and start like knocking this thing to pieces. You're really feeling for him because obviously we love Grogu. Like, again, why didn't we have more of this? Like, he's such a lovable character. And then we've seen him grow a little bit where he can like jump around and flip and stuff. And then if you haven't seen Book of Boba Fett, you're watching this going, how does he know how to do that now? I don't like, I don't get it, you know? And you really feel in this moment, you're really nervous for Grogu, but you're really not that nervous because you're like, they're not going to kill him.
Yeah.
I know they're not
stakes.
going to. No. And so as this is happening, Bo-Katan comes down and she rams into Gideon before he can kill Din. And then she tells him, go save your son. Cool moment here. You know, Bo-Katan has her beef with Moff Gideon, and obviously Din wants to go save his son.
Perfect timing, I might add, for her to come down and save him. I mean, that was kind of like, okay, this is going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Gideon asks Kryze if she's going to surrender or fight. She draws out the Darksaber, and he takes out his cool little electro staff thingy. Then we see Grogu jumping around, just escaping from these little guys. You really feel for him. He's like kind of panting and like he's scared, and you feel bad for him. And you're just like, oh, I love him. He's the best. He's the star of the show. I don't know why more of the season wasn't focused on him more. And then we see Din come.
Supposed to be there.
Grogu, he falls down and that thing comes on top of him and he's like scared, and then Din comes to his rescue and starts fighting these guards. And just a good scene as they're kind of working together. You know, Grogu's grown up a little bit and they get to fight together, which I thought was really cool. Really fun scene to watch them and like to see how they've been able to make this little puppet thing be able to kind of hold his own and help Din, and he's not like just a useless little baby. Was like, that was cool, I thought. So that's a positive thing with the episode, I thought. Then at this, while this is going on, we see Gideon and Bo-Katan are fighting. Grogu's using his force powers, and they end up killing the rest of the guards. And Din is very proud of his son, you can tell here, which was a sweet moment, you know?
Also, the Praetorian guards didn't put up much of a fight.
No.
I guess. I mean, they were kind of knocked. I mean, for all the faults of the sequel trilogy, at least Rey and Kylo Ren struggled a little bit when they were fighting the Praetorian guards. I mean, that felt like it had more tension than what we saw here.
And they struggled with them. They were badass, and that's the best scene of that movie is in that throne room. In my
choreography
opinion,
of the first like minute is not good, and then once they like actually zoom in on the characters, they're fine.
I mean, that was we can get into that in another episode, but like that scene had so much potential to go a different direction, and like but it was really cool, very visually pleasing as well.
But then
this
like
one, you're
Din
right,
and this kid are able to take him out in like 5 minutes. I don't know. I just think I don't know. It just doesn't add stakes.
I thought there was going to be some kind of Deus Ex Machina moment where, like, you know, Ahsoka comes back. Because the episode is called The Return. The Return of what? The Mandalorians to Mandalore, I guess? Okay. So then, at this point, blah, blah, blah. Axe Woves is crashing down. I forgot about this. He's on the way down. He's like, get out of there. I'm just going to crash this ship into the base. Gideon is beating Bo-Katan. Yeah, he does beat her, actually. And
he should have broken her hand, by the way.
Yeah.
He like squeezes her arm or something. Like he squeezes her arm so she dropped, or how does this work? He crushes the Darksaber and like squeezes her hand. I'm like, did he just break her wrist? And then it's like, oh, the Darksaber falls and it breaks. It's like, oh, I guess not.
Yeah, you're right. They break it and then like the Darksaber's gone.
Which, by the way, isn't the Darksaber made of Beskar?
Good question. I don't know, actually. Yeah, I guess how is her hand not broken?
I don't know, because especially he has an Iron Man suit.
It's kind of a bummer. Also, like, I don't know. In fact, they broke it. Was that necessary, or I don't know.
And by the way, none of the Mandalorians have a reaction to the fact that the Darksaber is destroyed. That's another plot thread. This is supposed to be the symbol of their culture. there's a faction of Mandalorians that believe in the Darksaber as like a religious artifact. Like it could be like a relic, like in Catholicism, right? They look at it and it's a revered and sacred thing. And yet nobody has a reaction to this. Nobody comments on it. There's no moment of like, the Darksaber no longer exists. Can she truly be the leader of Mandalore without it? And then it's like, Mandalore isn't an object, it's a people. Like, they didn't even have, like dialogue like that.
They forgot about Paz, no problem, and they forgot about the Darksaber, which, I mean, you'd think the armor would have said something. She didn't.
The Darksaber is a huge part of their culture.
And also, didn't Gideon, like, really want it? He wanted it so bad, and then he just breaks it.
He did. He's like, surrender it to me in the previous episode.
And in this one, he goes, give it to me. And then they start fighting and he just breaks it. Okay, what? I thought maybe he would have broken it and then he has a different one that like he made or something. I don't know. Like, it felt like a weird choice. It was just a weird choice to make for something that he wanted so bad. That was such a big part of this season, kind of. And then...
It is a mess. The more we talk about this episode, the more I'm like... What was happening this entire season? What was going on?
What was the point of it? Gideon now is taunting Bo-Katan about how the Mandalorians are weak without their trinkets. Funny, but also you cared about it a lot too, dude.
You wanted
loved the thing. Yeah, you loved the trinkets as well, and you have all the Mandalorian trinkets too. Like your little Mandalorian stan. You love Mandalorian culture clearly, and like their cool armor. So what are you talking about?
Yeah, you stole their identity basically with like your entire new outfit.
Yeah.
So don't go mocking her obsession with trinkets, Mandalorian trinkets.
Yeah. Then at this moment, we see Din Djarin come to the rescue of Bo-Katan, shooting him from behind. They're forcing him to the edge. At this time, Axe Woves is crashing the ship down into the underground base. Gideon's not going down without a fight, but Grogu uses the Force to hurl Gideon's Electro Staff down the edge, and he plays a big part here. I thought that was awesome. Again, like the fact that Grogu's now like able to help a lot is like, it's great. That was a cool little moment there. And then at this moment, the ship crashes and Gideon is consumed by the Inferno.
Is he,
though? Big explosion. There's a big explosion. And we see that Grogu has been able to protect Din and Bo-Katan with his cool little Force bubble trick. Apparently he's Violet from The Incredibles. Speaking of The Incredibles.
No, he pulled... Oh, I can't say that. That's a Rebel spoiler. I can't say that. Okay. Never mind.
He's Violet from The Incredibles. Has a little force field around them. Which is okay.
Which, by the way, hero pose. They're all, like, posed there.
Yeah.
You notice that? It's like Grogu's pushing back and it's like... It was kind of Marvel-y. If you really think... Like, that shot was like... It felt like a scene, like, out of Marvel.
Yeah.
It was very Marvel-y. There it is.
But also, this was supposed to be a big moment, right? But it wasn't really. I didn't feel it. I was like, oh, this has just been. It's been so, like jump in, jump out kind of thing, like from scene to scene. Where like there wasn't enough tension that built up to this moment, in my opinion. So it didn't have that big like impactful feeling that it should have while they're playing this grand music. You're sitting there like, oh, they want this to be a big thing. It's just, I don't feel it.
I don't know. Add some stakes. Like, have Bo-Katan get, I don't want to say mortally injured, but injure her.
Yeah.
You know? And
then, so...
At least make me fear for her life.
So, yeah, we see and now we can talk about this, because we see Moff Gideon explodes. Is he actually dead? Probably not.
Why is this always the conclusion with all these characters that are off? It was like, is Tech actually dead? Like,
we shouldn't be thinking that every time, you know?
Yep, we shouldn't be thinking some deaths are just gonna say, because if they
bring
obvious. Him back now, it's gonna be cheap.
Well, it's too obvious. They just showed all these clones he had without mustaches. The one we just saw didn't have a mustache, and that was one of the things you brought up. You're like, hey, did you notice Moff Gideon doesn't have a mustache anymore? And I'm like, oh yeah, I guess you're right. And then we see all the other clones without him, and you're like, okay, it's kind of obvious he cloned himself, and he's not totally gone. Okay, cool.
Which, by the way, is like, can't Moff Gideon at this point, I mean, they wasted him in the 3rd season, but now I feel like his time is over. Like, you can't bring him back now, because right now they're trying to usher in a new age of Thrawn. Like, Thrawn's going to be the next big baddie, and he is going to be a massive threat. I feel like Moff Gideon's time is up. And if you bring him back after this, it's just going to be like, okay, we're beating a dead horse.
Yeah, and it just his death didn't mean that much because he was only in 2 episodes, so I don't care.
Yeah.
I guess he was kind of orchestrating things behind the scenes, but so what? You could have brought him back a while ago and hinted more, like shown him once or twice that he was alive with. I mean, I don't know, dude. This is just going to bring me down another rabbit hole of tangents with the Coruscant episode and the way they did this whole season. And I don't want to get into that, but like,
well, the groundwork for seasons 1 and 2 was so exciting. Like, why does the Empire still want Grogu? Why are they trying to get his blood? Why are they so obsessed with this idea of cloning? I mean, like, they had that whole scene in season 2 of Mando with Cara Dune, Greef Karga, and Mando going through that creepy cloning facility with a bunch of people, like half-baked clones that looked like Snoke. But apparently they're like Moff Gideons now.
I guess.
I don't know. It just, I feel like it was kind of a disappointing conclusion to that.
Yeah. Well, he's probably not dead, so they'll bring him back at some point.
You know
somehow Gideon returned.
You know what they could have done is they could have introduced the character of Starkiller from Force Unleashed. That's what they could have done instead. They could have introduced this guy played by Sam Witwer. Yeah, then you could have an excuse to bring Sam Witwer in as himself into Star Wars, not playing Darth Maul, not playing Palpatine or somebody else. He can come into Star Wars as himself. You bring Sam Witwer in as this guy that's tracking Mando and Grogu, and he's like this big threat. And let's say that Mando and Grogu dispose of him. And they think he's dead, only to find out at the very end of the season, no. We not only have a clone of this guy, but we have a clone Force-sensitive version of this guy. And you find out it's this huge reveal that the Empire's trying to create a clone army to serve them in Starkiller's, like the first in a bunch of projects that they have planned. Like he's like the test monkey.
Yeah,
like people would have lost their minds if Starkiller showed up.
Yeah, and like it was. I agree with you. It's like Snoke and the Emperor were just part of something bigger. They were like testing out a bunch of different stuff. It wasn't just Snoke.
Right, like, dude, people would have lost their shit if that was Starkiller from Force Unleashed instead of Moff Gideon cloning himself. He's cloning this guy Starkiller. Oh my gosh, the entire fandom.
By the way, we know he's canon now because of Andor, because of the antique shop in Andor. You know, they have the the Starkiller.
They have the Starkiller, the helmet or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's like missed opportunity there. Like they didn't have to do much, but even that would have been more interesting than what we got, and people would have lost their minds.
No, totally. Yeah, there was no. You don't need to have big reveals necessarily, but there was just no. There's no really huge moments here that like made me excited.
I'm not looking for cameos. I'm just like drive me forward with the stories. I don't need to see Luke Skywalker or Ahsoka Tano in this finale. I don't care if they have their own space to appear, and I don't think that they always need to show up in these finales or whatever. But like Bo-Katan and Din Djarin are big enough characters, and Grogu are big enough to carry the show by themselves, but they're just not putting them in interesting situations to make me care.
Yeah.
Or feel invested.
That's fair. Following the defeat of Gideon, the Armorer holds a ceremony at the Living Waters. They start baptizing Paz Vizsla's kid, who clearly just doesn't care that his dad's dead. Okay, they don't mention this. This is such a good point you brought up. I didn't even think about that. Like, they don't mention him. What a weird choice. What a weird choice to make after a dramatic death. Because,
I don't know. It's strange.
So they baptize...
Or you think they'd have like a ceremony that's like, we devote the song of Paz Vizsla to the ancestors. You just throw in a little scene like that. And then, like, that's the ceremony instead of Ragnar's baptism, which I don't know why they felt the need
on his Walmart like version of Mandalorian armor.
In the waters, like, what if it was them devoting his father's song to the stories of the ancestors? Like, that would have been powerful. I think.
Yeah, too much thought, Melissa. You're putting too much thought into it. How dare you?
Right. I'm just supposed to give mundane.
So they baptize him, and then Din comes up and places Grogu there. He wants him to be baptized, but he's too young. And then Djarin's like, I want to give him permission. Oh, his parents can give him permission. She's like, they're too far away if they're even alive. And then Din Djarin's like, I'll adopt him as my own. And she's like, all right, fine. This is the way. And then they say that you can be his son. And then they rename him Din Grogu as his apprentice. The other Mandalorians chant, this is the way. And then she says he needs to go on journeys with them. Okay, so that kind of sets up maybe we can get back to some more interesting Din and Grogu stuff next season, potentially.
Din Grogu also. So
I kind of like that. I think it's fine. I mean, it makes sense to me.
Din's first name Djarin? Or how does this work?
I think it's more like a what's the culture that has like the
Is
surnames?
is it like Japanese or is it like culture with surnames first?
I kind of like that.
Yeah, it's Japanese. It is. It's Japanese.
So there you go. I think that's cool. It kind of ties into the Kurosawa stuff a little bit.
Yeah.
So they call him Din Grogu, an apprentice, blah, blah, blah. And then we see beneath the depths of the living waters, the Mythosaur's just chilling. He's hanging out. And then they go to the Great Forge and they light the big Olympic torch and they start screaming for Mandalore.
For Narnia and for Aslan.
And also, it's like the armor and Bo-Katan are up there. It's like, all right, who's in charge here? I guess they both are. Like, I'm so confused by their roles here.
And there's no Darksaber anymore, and nobody
No
has
one
a
cares.
problem with this. Nobody cares.
They don't mention
the
it. It's just
symbol
broken.
of our culture is gone, and nobody makes a mention of it. There are no concerns, no qualms. Even Bo-Katan, she has spent 3 series looking for the Darksaber and trying to take control of Mandalore, and specifically trying to possess the Darksaber. That has been her character.
Yeah.
And then the second this thing is taken away from her, she just has no.
She's like, oops,
response.
okay, I guess it's
I'm not
gone.
concerned.
My poor trinket.
It's gone.
Yeah. Then we go to Navarro. Okay, the show's still not over. And we see Grief Karga telling Din that they appreciate what they've done. He gives him a new cabin on the outskirts of town. Karga says that you can use it in between adventures. They shake hands, and then Din gives him a gift, which is the new IG-11 unit. Oh, also, sorry, I skipped a part. Sorry, backing up real quick because I skipped a scene here.
Okay, that's fine.
They go to the Adelphi base, and they meet up with Carson Teva, who offers to buy him a drink. We see Dave Filoni cameo here. Cool stuff.
Very obviously in the
Glup
back.
Shitto's not in this scene. But we see a really cute, Grogu jumping up, and he's eating the little peanuts or whatever. Grogu, you can kind of hear him say dad a little bit. He has like a little babbling thing where he's like points to the IG unit. Kind of sounds like dad. Kind of cute. And Din's offering to work for them to take out more Imperial warlords. He wants to do his bounty hunter work, get back to his roots, off the books. This was a cool scene in this thing. And Din asks for the IG droid's head, saying he needs it for parts as a down payment. Then he goes to Navarro. He sees Grief Karga. They appreciate what he's done. They give him a deed to the house, and he gives them the IG unit as the marshal because that's what Grief Karga needed at the beginning.
And they can't seem to get rid of IG-11 as a character. We can't let that character just die.
No.
He has to die at least 4 times.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know why they keep doing this.
Like, let the character die. Like, you killed the character in a great way in season 1 by letting it blow up so Din, Cara Dune, and Grief Karga could get away with the kid. But they can't let this guy go. They just can't let him die.
No,
to quote Kylo Ren, let the past die. Kill it if you have to. Kill IG-11. Just let him die. Stop resurrecting. It's like beating a dead corpse,
Yeah.
Like you keep lifting it out of the grave. You keep digging it up.
Beating a dead droid more efficiently. And then as we see the Incel and Droid Smiths, which I love them. I'm glad to see them again. And then IG, everyone's really happy to see him. And then we see Din in his cool little, I'd say that's probably like a 700 square foot cabin. Pretty nice. Good view. And we see Din looking over it. He's happy. And Grogu's doing his little force powers with the frog. And then we do this really weird cartoony, that's all, folks.
It's weird.
Weird ending.
What was that ending?
I wouldn't hate it if it was just the circle that closes in, because that's how obviously a lot of the Star Wars movies end.
But that was Looney Tunes.
That was focused on just them two.
Focused on just Grogu. Ugh.
It was just a weird way to end it.
I'm not mad. I'm just like kind of laughing at it now. Like, this is absurd. Like, this is ridiculous. I wasn't mad at it. I'm just like, this was a weird creative choice there to do that. So
that's
strange.
How you end it. And then it felt like that was like final. Like, oh, here they are forever. They just chill and go on adventures now. And you're like, oh, they're not really setting up another season. I mean, the last one ended on such a big note, and this one just ended on like, okay, we're done now. Thanks for watching. And you're like, oh, okay.
And it felt very final. It felt very like it felt like, oh, we don't necessarily need to have new adventures with them, but if we decide to,
My
We'll just
theory
close
is
it off
they
here.
did that. A lot of TV shows do this when they don't know if they're getting renewed for another season. They end the season in a way where if they don't make a new season, it can stand on its own as being the last one. So that's kind of the vibe that I got here, was like they don't really know 100% of when they'll make another season. They didn't want to wait another 2 years like they did with between season 2 and 3. So I got the feeling that they're just like, let's just end it on a really final type of note, and then if we get another season going, we can start totally fresh and do whatever we want without having to rely on the past threads of last season. That's kind of the vibe I
this
got.
is also like, obviously some problems have been going on behind the scenes. I don't doubt that Jon Favreau's had issues, and there was a lot of struggle for power over this show, over this particular season. I think a lot of that became clear in the writing and the direction, and I think this ending is also kind of a result of that, just in case somebody walks.
Yeah.
That's what it feels like to me. In case somebody walks or we lose our directors or producers of the show, we can say that we concluded it.
Yeah.
This whole finale, this whole season played it very safe to me. And the biggest thing that really led into the downfall of this season as a whole is getting Din and Grogu reunited in the Book of Boba Fett. Like, it just destroyed this season.
It really did. And I think someone had mentioned this. Maybe it was even you. Maybe it was one of our viewers. And they were like, I don't know why they did that. And at the time I was like, I mean, it was the strong suit of the season, but it really, really crippled this season in terms of the flow of the story. You could have had the buildup of them reuniting those story threads in the first couple episodes here. Then it feels earned. Then we're not lost if we haven't watched Book of Boba Fett. And then it just feels like it flows a little bit better. And you care about the characters a little bit more. Like the Din and Grogu thing isn't as sidelined as it was this season. So it would help connect everything a little bit better. And that decision, Book of Boba Fett, just had a domino effect for this whole season.
You could see, honestly, you could have seen Din losing himself a little bit during this season. Like, he's kind of lost without the child. And you could get to this finale where Din gets captured and Grogu can sense it in the Force while he's with Luke. And you can kind of parallel Return of the Jedi with that. And maybe Luke goes with Grogu and helps save Din. And then you see in this really dramatic moment that, I don't know, Grogu is the one to save Din. And then you can, like, remove Din's helmet again. Like, something happens in regard to that. And then you have Luke Skywalker there to help out. Like, you just could have done literally anything else. But the fact that they kept those two characters together, I don't know, it made for a less interesting story. And Din didn't get any character development. Like, I don't know, having to learn how to move on for a bit without this kid. Like, having to learn to let him go, because that's an essential part of parenting, right? You want the best for your kid, so you have to learn how to let them go, even if it hurts you. And you could reunite them at the end, but in this really powerful way, and that would have added stakes and drama to the finale. Like, imagine Din getting captured in this last episode, and Grogu's not there.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh my god, what are they going to do to Din? And then in the finale, Grogu comes back, and he's the one to save his dad. Literally anything else.
Yeah, literally anything else. Should we jump into questions in the last 10 minutes here?
We have a lot. I don't want to rush through those.
Okay.
I don't know. How many do we have? We have a lot, don't we?
Yeah, there's quite a few.
Do you want to do a separate episode on that tomorrow, like short?
All right,
So
let's wrap this up, then we can give our final thoughts with the viewers on our next episode.
Sure.
We'll do maybe 20, 30 minutes on that. But I mean, look, overall, this season was just not cohesive enough. It was, and we've been saying this throughout the whole season, the Book of Boba Fett stuff really crippled the storylines here. A lot of it felt thrown together. It felt really rushed. This episode generally felt rushed. A lot of really good elements, special effects, and some cool fight scenes, and a couple cool moments here and there. But overall, I still don't really understand the full point of this season. It didn't feel very well thought out. So for this episode, I'd probably give it like a 7.1, 6.971-ish. It was entertaining. It was above average. It was a entertaining episode. And then for the season as a whole, I mean, I give it probably like a 6.5, to be honest. It was a disappointing season coming off of such a strong one. This could have been such a good season of television coming off of a really strong second season. Like, in terms of all TV shows, this had potential to be such a really strong season, and didn't really deliver in the ways that it could have. It was still really, each individual episode is an entertaining thing. I'll rewatch them. They're entertaining episodes, but you know, as a standalone season of television, it wasn't connected enough with, the episodes weren't connected enough with each other, and it didn't have enough stakes or enough gravity or enough character development for me to love it.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. I don't know what I'm going to say that's much different from you, but I would have to rank it in a similar fashion. Like, this episode was probably like a 7.1 out of 10. And then the season is like, it'd be lucky to be in the 6s, you know, like 6.4, you know, 6.5, because there are good elements in there, and there are some very enjoyable things about it. Like, the production quality is really, really good. You have a few good character moments, but as a standalone season, it was just so average. And it just felt like they lost their momentum, especially you're riding the high of season 2, and then this is what happens. It just felt like they lost their sense of direction. And I got to be perfectly honest here. I'm shocked I'm even saying this, but at the same time I've been watching this, I've been watching season 3 of Picard. And like I've told you, the first 2 seasons of that show are some of the worst television I've ever seen in my entire life. Like, they are actually so bad to the point where it's like unwatchable. Season 3 managed to turn it around in a lot of aspects. Still not perfect, but I was more invested in Picard season 3 than I was The Mandalorian.
Yeah.
And I was shocked. I was genuinely shocked, where it was like, what would I rather watch tonight? The Mandalorian or season 3 of Picard? It's like, I kind of want to let's watch Picard. It's a little bit more interesting. Like, I just felt more invested in those characters, and I cared a lot more. And I was like, yikes.
Yeah.
That's not a good sign.
With this is too, like, the things I loved about this season, the Grogu and Din stuff, him getting in the IG unit, so creative, so cool. We get to hear Grogu like talk. The fight scenes are good. Bo-Katan, I think, she's a great addition to the show. Really strong character. It just wasn't. She had so much potential to be like better.
It's not her
I think
show.
I think she was a great addition to it. It just wasn't fully complete. The second episode I thought was I really, really enjoyed that. It's just overall, I wasn't looking forward to these episodes every week. I didn't know where we were going, so I can't really care.
Yeah, you didn't have any
episodes are really connected.
You're like, I don't know how long this is going to be. I don't know if it's going to be a side quest. I don't know if it's going to be character focused. So it's like, you don't really have the drive.
Yeah.
Which is fair. It's completely fair.
But guys, what did you think, guys? Please let us know below. We'll talk about all the viewer thoughts. I think people are on the same page as us, and so we'll do a separate quick episode on viewer thoughts. We'll give away our last T-shirt for best question or theory. So there's still time to do that if you guys want to write us in. Actually, I don't know if we'll have this edited by then, but
no, we should. I should be able to
we'll check all that, and we'll go through questions, and we'll talk through it. But guys, let us know what you think in the comments below. Was this a satisfying season? Was it a satisfying end? Let us know, and let us know what you guys are looking forward to with the Ahsoka show. Don't forget to please like and subscribe and click the notification bell so you know when our episodes are coming out. Also, check out our merch shop, please. Check us out on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok at @Star_Wars_pod. We do a lot of memes. We're in the meme game, so we do some good Star Wars memes if you want to see that on YouTube Shorts or TikTok or any of that stuff. And then we obviously have a lot more content coming out in the next couple months. So if you guys want to stay tuned for that, we'd appreciate it, and you can click subscribe to be caught up to date on all that. But this was the last Mando breakdown of season 3, and we'll see if there's a season 4. I'm sure season 4 will be announced in the coming months, and hopefully it's a little bit more put together and cohesive is what I would say. But look, fun watch. It was a fun watch, but overall just left a lot to be wanted, I suppose.
Yeah, comparing it to the last 2 seasons, it's just not it. Wasn't there.
Yeah. Well, it's been fun doing this show. I always have fun doing these breakdowns. This was a fun watch to do, and there's a lot more to come. The Ahsoka show will be a really good one to break down, and then we'll also I'll do some Rebel reactions coming up. We also have Jedi Survivor coming out, so a lot more content, guys. Please subscribe if you want to see that, and we'll see you on our next episode. Hopefully, coming up here soon.
Yep. Sounds about right. See you guys in our listener breakdown question theories episode. Bye, guys.
Bye.